Hey folks, how you all doing? I thought I would do an albums ranking today of a band that rarely gets mentioned in the VC, and that is British band Manfred Mann, who in the 1960s released 5 studio albums. They went from an R&B blues-based band up to producing Baroque pop, psychedelic rock, art pop, jazz fusion. It was all there. There were some prominent members in the band as well. You had Manfred Mann himself, who was the keyboardist and principal songwriter for most of the songs and producer as well. He ended up disbanding the band and going on to form Manfred Mann's Earth Band, as we all know from the 1970s, especially with their mega worldwide hit Blinded by the Light, which was written by Bruce Springsteen. There were also some other prominent members in that band besides Manfred Mann himself. In the mid-60s there, after their second album, going into their third album, Klaus Voormann joined the band for their last 3 albums. He's a German record producer, instrumentalist, etc. He worked with everybody from the solo Beatles on their works in the 1970s through to Carole King, etc., etc. Highly respected in the music industry, just like the likes of, say, Quincy Jones was as well. He's highly respected, as I said. Jack Bruce, better known for being part of Cream. He was part of Manfred Mann during that mid to late 60s period as well. So, you know, there's a lot of high-profile musicians who were part of Manfred Mann or started in the Manfred Mann camp and then moved on to bigger and brighter things. You know, Manfred Mann had string of hits in the mid-60s from 64 to 68 that's pretty well unparalleled or the equal to the best bands at the time, like the Stones, the Beatles, the Who, etc., the Kinks. Come Tomorrow, Pretty Flamingo, which everyone knows, Do Wah Diddy Diddy, Ha Ha Said the Clown, Semi-Detached Suburban Mr. James, The Mighty Quinn, Sha-La-La, Hubble Bubble, Toil and Trouble, 5 4 3 2 1. We all know all them songs. They are great singles. So yeah, I thought I would do this ranking simply because they're not mentioned much in the VC. So we'll take a look at the 5 principal studio albums of Manfred Mann. They actually released 9 if you want to count the North American releases that were mishmashes of the UK albums, like the Capitol Records that they did with the Beatles early albums. But I'm just focusing on the 5 UK stock standard studio albums by Manfred Mann. So I'm going to rank them from my least favourite to favourite. Okay, so at number 5 we go to the 5 Faces of Manfred Mann. This was released in 1964, debut album. Like the majority of the early albums of the UK bands of that period, there were numerous covers on each of their albums. Most of them do the R&B bluesy covers. These guys are no different. Probably half this album is covers, like, you know, the early Beatles were, the early Stones, etc., etc. There's covers here from artists like Howlin' Wolf, Cannonball Adderley, Muddy Waters, Will Brady, Ann Cole, Ike and Tina Turner, Joe South and Bo Diddley, which is what you'd expect from the period of the singers they were. It's a very bluesy album, as you can imagine, from the artists I've just mentioned. There's hints of jazz on here, which Manfred Mann himself, being a pianist, he was, I guess, classically jazz trained, so that influence is going to go through their music anyway. This sort of bluesy stuff really isn't my cup of tea. But that said, I do like the originals that are on this album. You know, What You Gonna Do About It, I'm Your Kingpin, Without You, and You Gotta Take It. All the originals, great songs. It's interesting to note that there were no UK singles released off this album. However, in North America, the album did include Sha-La-La and Do Wah Diddy Diddy as replacement tracks for a couple of others. So yeah, for those who don't know, even though those 2 hit singles were hits, Sha-La-La was a cover from the Shirelles, and Do Wah Diddy Diddy was actually a cover by a group called the Exciters at the time. This album comes in at 5.5 out of 10 for me. Number 4 on my list, I'm going for their second album. This is called Man Made. This was released in 1965. Like debut, its vast majority of tracks are covers, but they're not all blues covers like the original debut album. There's some R&B soul stuff on here as well, so their sound is slightly changing. There's a couple of instrumentals on here, I guess jazz fusion, modern jazz, you could call it those sort of things if you want. It had a bit of a Georgie Fame type vibe to the jazz that was happening on here. Again, no UK singles on this album, but the North American release did include the multi-million seller Pretty Flamingo. The album is an improvement on the debut simply because there are various other styles on here other than just blues. Not a great album by any means, but still comes in at a reasonable 6.5 out of 10. Number 3 on my list, we go to their third studio album, As Is. Personnel change on this album. Original vocalist Paul Jones has now left the band. He wanted to pursue a solo career. And Mike Vickers, the original flautist, sax player, occasional guitar player, has also left the band. In comes Mike Diabo, the new singer, and Jack Bruce, who I've mentioned before, as we all know, was a member of Cream. This one's got a slight psychedelic pop rock sound to it. Out goes the blues, in comes jazz fusion. There's 2 covers on here. Autumn Leaves, which is a French tune that had to be translated into English, and a cover of Bob Dylan's Just Like a Woman. I forgot to mention that Klaus Vormann actually joined the band on this album, remained with them till the end as well. So I guess that's probably where some of their sound came from, in the production and the way it was created. I think Klaus Vormann probably had a hand in this. It doesn't say in any biographies or anything that he had a lot to do with the production work and the studio work, but I'm pretty convinced that he would have, simply because of what he did later in his career. Excellent album, 8.5 out of 10. My second favourite album, the Mighty Garvey. This is their 5th album. Gone are the R&B, jazz and blues sounds of the earlier albums. This is a fully fledged rock, pop, psychedelic, art pop and baroque pop album. The album does contain a couple of hits here, 2 of their latter hits, Haha Said the Clown, and a cover of Dylan's Mighty Quinn. The album itself is actually a parody of the Sgt. Pepper's album, with its central theme of a fictional band, i.e. the Mighty Garvey. It's not cliched or corny, but it's still tongue-in-cheek in places. A great album to end a phase of Manfred Mann, the person, career, and move on to that phase of his career to move on to Manfred Mann's Earth Band. 9 out of 10. Which leaves number 1 on my list is their first album from 1968, Up the Junction. This was actually used as a soundtrack to a movie of the same name. Stars a very young Dennis Waterman. That period. The movie itself is about a girl from the upper class, snobby suburb of Chelsea. She's an heiress to some fortune who we're not laid privy to in the movie. She decides to go down to Battersea to see what it's like to be working class, gets a job in a factory, gets to work with the young, working class girls down there, ends up in a relationship with the character portrayed by Dennis Waterman. Anyway, there's about 3 or 4 songs, instrumentals on this album. It's baroque pop, it's art pop, it's psychedelic. It's not the things you'd normally have on a pop album back in that period. It does work very, very well. It works outside of the concept of the movie So the songs do work well together, they do flow together. It has a life outside of the movie. If you've never ever heard this album, I suggest you can go and get it. It's one of those great late 1960s, almost psychedelic-y rock pop albums that deserve a lot more credit than what it gets. So there you go, Manfred Mann, Up the Junction, my favourite album by Manfred Mann. Anyway, folks, that's it. I just thought I'd run down my favourite rankings of the Manfred Mann studio albums, the UK studio albums. Let me know in the comments section below, what do you think of Manfred Mann? Are you a fan of Manfred Mann, the band, just the singles? Have you ever heard any of their studio albums? I've never seen anyone show one in the VC. But yeah, it'd be nice to know if anyone else likes Manfred Mann or loves them. To me, they're one of my favourite UK groups from that period. But anyway, folks, if you hung around till the end, great stuff. I appreciate it. Anyway, stay safe, take care. All for now. Catch you around, and bye, folks.